Good evening, and thank you for joining us here on blackdoctor.org. I am Ellis Dean, the Director of Digital Programming and Production at Black Doctor, and we have a wonderful program scheduled for you this evening. So the title of this program is Lupus, the Questions People Don't Ask. And so this is interesting because there's a lot of times when we talk about different health conditions, we just say, okay, we typically come to the model of here's what you need to know. But what about those questions that people don't ask? And so I thought that was a wonderful title. I'll just say I didn't come up with it. Our girl Jay that you're going to meet later on in this program, she came up with that title, and I thought that was a fantastic way to frame this broadcast tonight, because we do need to ask those questions so we can get a better understanding of people that have lupus, the condition, and people that are living with lupus, and the challenges that they have to overcome while living with this condition. So a couple of things I want you to do before we get started. We introduce our wonderful panel. Number one, let us know where you're watching from. We'd like to know where people are watching us from all over the world. So drop that in the comment section. Also, a different additional caveat, if you are living with lupus or if you know somebody that's living with lupus, also put that in the comment section, because we'd like to know who our lupus warriors are out there. Number two, if you know somebody that needs this information, please share this on your page or tag them in this program so we can get that to you as well. We want to get this out to as many people as possible, so please do that. And then finally, if you have any questions, also please drop those in the comments so we can get your questions answered, because this program is all about you and educating you about lupus. So I know you didn't sign on just to see my smiling face, and so we're going to introduce you to our panel. First off, we have Miss Charnay. We're going to talk about our lupus warriors first, also known as Nay, as you can see there on the screen. And she is our lupus warrior advocate. And so she's got a wonderful story that she's going to be telling us there. Also, we have Gus Tucker. He is the host here on blackdoctor.org for our Financial Freedom Friday show. So one of the questions that people don't ask is, all of the medical bills that come from somebody living with lupus, how do you protect yourself financially and not just end up working all the time to pay bills? And so Gus is going to provide some tips and techniques. And even if you're not living with lupus, you might want to pick up some of these things so you can protect your finances so you can grow. We also have Dr. Sharika Brookings. She is a nephrologist and works with students that are living with lupus, and she's going to be our kind of anchor of this program to kind of give you all of the technical stuff that it comes to dealing with lupus. And then finally, we have Jay Nealis. She is the founder, CEO of Crowning Lupus, which is an organization that is all about helping people that are living with lupus. And so she's got some wonderful things that she's doing with her organization. So she's going to share that. And she really is the one that really championed this program here. And here in May is Lupus Awareness Month. So here we are midway through, and we've got this great program. So I see some people that are already joining in. We've got Annie. She is from Go For It. Her niece is living with lupus. We've got your niece. So we're some people that are giving us shout outs and tagging people. So thank you so much. Keep those names coming. Keep shouting them out, because we want our lupus warriors to be lifted up today. So first question is, for those that might be new to this or are watching this program and don't understand what is lupus. So the first question for you, Dr. Brookins, is what is lupus, and when and how is it typically diagnosed?
Okay, so lupus is actually an overall terminology. However, there are 4 types of lupus. So there is systemic lupus erythematosus, also known as SLE, and that's when the autoimmune condition attacks various organs throughout your body or various systems. Then we have cutaneous lupus, which is where the inflammatory condition affects mainly your skin. Then we have drug-induced lupus, and then we have neonatal lupus. So there are 4 different classifications of lupus, but overall, it's an autoimmune disease in which your immune system, which is kind of like the fighters of our body, but it's when it attacks itself. So it's attacking your own body. And so depending on which class or which type of lupus you have, that kind of determines what's being affected, and that can then turn into the different signs and symptoms that you will see.
Well, see, I learned something this question did not know. There's four types of lupus, so that that tells you something right there. So, what is like the normal, typical treatment course for lupus?
So I will say, of the four types, the most common type is the SLE type of lupus. And generally, because it is an autoimmune condition in which your body is attacking itself, the most common form of treatment will be therapies that are actually quieting or lowering your immune system to kind of help it stop attacking itself. So those are generally the type of agents that we start, which are very potent drugs. So not only are you dealing with the symptoms of lupus itself, but there comes a lot of side effects with the therapy as well. So it's a very difficult to manage and difficult to treat condition.
Wow. So, Charnay, our lupus warrior, tell us a little bit about your story. When did you realize there was something going on with your body, and when were you diagnosed? Because I have heard that sometimes it takes um, for lupus patients of color up to 6 years to be properly diagnosed. And so, when did you notice the symptoms, and when were you diagnosed? And then, how did your life change after receiving that diagnosis?
Yes. So I was diagnosed on Thanksgiving, actually, Thanksgiving of 2011. I experienced the symptoms. I was actually blessed. I probably experienced the symptoms maybe 6 to 7 months before I actually went to a doctor to get checked out. My main symptoms were like joint pain. It was one morning where I felt paralyzed in bed, and that's when I knew that I had to go to the doctor. And so I went to a primary care physician, and they did some blood work, didn't find anything. I kind of bounced around. I went to an orthopedic doctor. I just kind of bounced around because, it takes a while for it to get, diagnosed. And so I finally got to a rheumatologist, and they did some blood work on me. And that's when they were like, well, you have lupus. And I was just like, what is that? Because to be honest, I had never heard of it until I got diagnosed. And so he gave me these pamphlets, and he told me, he was like, do not go on the internet and read anything. Just read these pamphlets. But me being hard headed, I went on the internet and I read everything, and I thought I was going to die because the way the internet had it sounding, I was like, oh no, I'm about to die. Let me just go ahead and write my will. I'm going to die. And so, that's what made me reach out to the Lupus Foundation of America for the support group. But for me, it was 6 months to finally get that diagnosis, going from doctor to doctor. But that is true. It is a lot of people that live with the symptoms for years because they either think it's, arthritis or, that kind of thing. But yeah, 6 months for me. And I'm telling you, like after I got diagnosed, I immediately, I was depressed because like I told you, I thought I was going to die. I thought my life was about to be over because, I was young. I was a young, carefree person doing whatever I wanted to do, eat whatever I wanted to eat. And lupus just totally changed my life. Like it immediately put me like in a grieving process. So yeah, it's something.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, you have the great attitude about it now. So we're going to talk about how you moved from that depressive state to the attitude that you're displaying today. But thank you for that. So Dr. Brookins, is that kind of so? She said her journey is kind of atypical. And one thing I want to point out for our audience is, you notice how she said she went from doctor to doctor. She stayed on top of this. How many people don't get satisfied by a diagnosis and don't go back to the doctor, right? And so that's part of how these processes can get lengthened out. Where if you don't continue to follow up, she went to orthopedic, didn't find it, and then she found the one that gave her the answer, and then went from there. But just think about it: if she had stopped along the way, she would have been suffering in silence. And so we have to really kind of pay attention to when somebody finds the relief, this because they're diligent. So I want to, commend you for staying on top of that. Dr. Brookins, is that typical what Shanae is going through, or is it kind of somewhere, is she on the better side in terms of from symptom to diagnosis?
That is definitely typical, and especially for minority women. So we do know that lupus impacts 9 out of 10 of those diagnosed with lupus are women.
Mhm.
And of that, we know that a large majority are minority women. And it is very well known throughout studies that minority women are diagnosed late. Minority women suffer from complications more commonly than other races. And, unfortunately, they, pass at a higher rate
Mhm.
from lupus for that reason. So it is not uncommon. And I think also, as she spoke, it's to her young age, a doctor may think she's suffering from something that is, not of an autoimmune and may just pass it off as, well, hey, maybe take this Tylenol or take this
Mhm.
ibuprofen for your joint pain and not realize that she's a young Black female. This is not typical of young people to
Right.
have arthritis where it was so debilitating for her that it had her feeling paralyzed. So it's not uncommon. And something we did speak about recently at a forum that we had here in Augusta last week was that, as you can see, she was bounced from a primary care provider to an orthopedic doctor, then to a rheumatologist.
Right.
But all specialties, we should be more aware and armed with diagnosing this condition because we can order those same lab tests. So it's
Right.
just a matter of being more vigilant as doctors to realize a young Black female should not have this form of debilitating arthritis.
Right. Right. So there's some great questions already coming in. So I'm going to ask this from Marcella. Is there a genetic component to lupus?
I will say that there are some studies that have found certain genes that are associated with lupus, but there hasn't been anything narrowed down to the point of where we're testing nationwide families or where we're testing nationwide individuals with lupus. So there's a long list of genes that have been identified, but nothing has been narrowed down to this gene is the cause of lupus. Because I tell you, once we narrow that down, we're on our way to a cure. So
Right.
unfortunately, we don't have a specific gene to identify with lupus. But we do know that um, if there is a relative or a close family member, we do know that there is an increased risk of suffering or having or being diagnosed with lupus. Yes.
And there's another great question coming in. What are those symptoms again? So I guess some people are curious about what are the symptoms because they might be experiencing some of them and want to make sure if they need to go talk who they need to go talk to. So what are the symptoms again? And Charlene, you can talk about your symptoms, and then Dr. Brookins, you can kind of fill in some of the other potential symptoms for lupus.
So my main symptom was joint pain, like arthritis in my hands, in my knees, and I also had a lot of swelling all over. I had swelling in my ankles.
Mhm.
I started to get this rash from my face, which I'm sure Dr. Sherika could talk about more, but it's a butterfly rash that I was getting on my face. But at that time, I didn't know that's what it was. I just kind of thought I was, messing up my skincare routine or something.
Right,
So,
right,
it was my rash and my joint pain and the swelling that I had all over and tiredness. Like it was a tiredness that sleep could not contain, like tired. And so those were my main symptoms in the beginning.
And in the beginning, as I mentioned with SLE or systemic lupus erythematosus, because it can affect different organs, the most common organs that we see affected initially are going to be the skin and the joints. So you will have that butterfly rash, which means it will come just like a butterfly across the nose and the cheek area. And then the joints, that can be anywhere. It can be your hands, your wrists, your elbows, your hips. It could be any. I will say more commonly, if you notice, and we describe it as if your joint pain is on both extremities, then that's definitely of a greater concern versus if it's just one hand or if it's just one elbow. When you're
Okay.
noticing that multiple joints are involved, that is definitely of concern that something is happening internally all over. We can also, lupus can affect the brain, lupus can affect your eyes, your kidneys.
Mm.
It literally can affect every single organ. But the most common initial symptoms are the rash, joint pain, and just feeling very tired or fatigued.
Is that the time where I can use my fancy word bilateral? That bilateral.
Yes, I was going to say that. Right. If you're noticing it being bilateral, you read my mind. I was going to say that.
That's fancy word, y'all, for having it on both sides. So
That's
it's
right. That's right. That's right, Dr. Dean.
okay. Yeah, I'll get my MD tonight. So, um, all right. So we got the symptoms. I hope that answers your those questions. We understand that we do need to do some more genetic testing in order to be able to decipher if there's a genetic kind of origin to it, and the more genetic testing we can get, the better, the closest we are to coming to a cure. So absolutely. So let's turn to you, Jade, from your organization. What inspired you to start this organization?
What inspired me was because there's no national foundation in South Carolina. And so, as a patient, when I got diagnosed, my diagnosis was quick. I started showing symptoms early, but my diagnosis was within 1 week of those symptoms. And so, when we were looking for support groups, there were none in South Carolina. And I was like, I shouldn't have to go all the way to Charlotte, where there's a Lupus Foundation of America there, or I shouldn't have to go all the way to Atlanta, and I'm not down here in Aiken, Carolina, dealing with this issue. And so it started from there. I wanted to bridge the gap. I wanted to create a place and a location for survivors in South Carolina and in the CSRA regions of Georgia, because that's literally 10 minutes from where I'm located. I wanted to create that space and create that sanctuary for survivors.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that, because you're right. There are some areas that are, I hate the word, but underserved, right? And so
Right.
we'll
We
say
are definitely one of those areas.
underrepresented. And so I love the spirit of entrepreneurship that says, you know what, if there's not one here, I'm gonna start one. And you're really helping a
Yep.
lot of people there get the help that they need without having to travel, right? Because not everybody has that ability to just up and go to Charlotte, up to go to major metropolitan areas to get the help and to find a community that can get the help. So wow, these are some great questions that are coming in. Do you always have to have the rash? Can it merely just be joint pain?
Okay, and I did see that question because I am watching over here. But you don't have to always you don't have to always have the rash. And there are some instances in which you only have skin issues, and that's what we would call cutaneous lupus. But you don't always have to have the rash. You don't always have to have the joint pain. That's the other mystery to lupus, is that everyone can present differently. However, it's just very common in minority female, but every case can present differently. And as Jade mentioned, she was diagnosed within a week. You know, Charnay, it took her about 6 months. I think that's what she said. But everyone can be different. We heard a story last week of a lady. It took her years.
Yeah.
She initially had pains in middle school, and she wasn't diagnosed until college.
Well, that's a whole show about particularly Black women and pain that we could talk about. All right. So we know that the bias in healthcare about Black women experiencing pain. And so if you come in presenting pain, they might give you a Tylenol and discharge you and not do the workup, not do the write up, because they don't believe you. And you say you're at a 10 and they say, she's, it's not a 10, and they give you some extra strength Tylenol and move on. And then you get frustrated. And we talked about this before. You get frustrated and don't re-engage. So, Charnay, go ahead.
I did want to mention one other symptom, which I think will be very interesting for us as Black women, but it can also affect your scalp and your hair. So when we may experience that hair loss, or we may experience alopecia, that could very well be starting signs of lupus.
Okay. All right. So we've got joint pain, we got the butterfly rash, we've got extreme fatigue, and now we've got alopecia, like early onset alopecia, or just like, oh, what's
Or
happening
hair
right now,
loss. Mm-hmm.
or hair loss, just general hair loss. So y'all write no symptoms down. So just, however, I don't want people to be hypochondriacs, right? Don't think when you brush your hair, you get a couple strands out, all of a sudden you got lupus. No, that's not run the lupus. But there's a process here. All right. So Charnay, talk about the changes that you had to make in your routine once you got the proper diagnosis.
Oh goodness. So the first thing, like I was telling you, I was young. Like I was going out, having fun with my friends, kicking it, eating whatever, doing whatever. Not a care in the world. Oh my goodness. But after being diagnosed, everything changed. From what I ate, I had to balance time, like something I would never think about, like having to be like, okay, well, I only have enough energy just to do this today. So maybe I'll clean up tomorrow. Like you're always trying to think about how you're going to use your energy. And it was a lot. It was a lot of an adjustment, having to share this with like family members and friends who so used to, being able to rely on you for everything. I was the yes girl, in my group, like, Charnay, come with us. Yeah, sure. Charnay, do this for me. Yeah, sure. But after being diagnosed, it became more about like self-care, self-preservation. I had to, well, no, I can't do that today. Well, no, I can't do that. I'm sorry, So it was definitely life-changing from what I, went out and did, from what I ate, what I drank, who I hung with, my environments. Also with lupus, I can't be out in the sun. So, if you got a daytime event, I can't, and it's outside, I'm sorry, I can't be there. So it just was life-changing overall. And you're always thinking about, what can you do today or what you can't do today? Because I may be fine today, but tomorrow, I may not, be so well. So.
Wow. And y'all know Black folks we like a day party.
We do. We
We're good for a day party now.
And brunch.
And brunch, right? So that's good. That's tragic right there. I'm making jokes, but I mean that is something serious that you have to think about. And there's some cultural components, right? There's some things that we just like to do. Yes. Summertime family reunions outside. We've got the fish fry and picnic that's going to happen, part of that family reunion. We go to the so things that you think about being outside, that changes your routine. And you just mentioned something, and I want to stay right there. And Jade, you can come in on this too. You said you're constantly thinking about it, right? Because of how what we consider, and I'm using air quotes, normal, going through life, you was kicking it, you was eating what you want, doing all these things, to I've got to think about every little thing that I do, everything that I put in my body, everywhere I go. How much energy reserves do I have to be able to do what would be considered everyday activities like cleaning up? How much energy do I have to give to that today? Or do I have to try to store some energy to be able to do that tomorrow? Right. Jade, did you have that same experience?
Yeah. So when I got diagnosed, I was a junior in high school. And so for me, it was kind of the same thing. But I will say my parents, I didn't really know how severe my situation was, because my parents, like, you have to know your child and what they can handle. And so even though I had like cords and all type of stuff coming out of my body, like my parents made it a party in the hospital. So I knew I was sick, but I didn't know how sick I was. And then it wasn't until even when I got to college, I never got no. So I was always going, my friends, I had a very close knit of friends who they knew if Jade was out, she was out. But as I got older and I graduated, that's when I started putting a little bit more emphasis on, okay, these are things that I can do. These are things that I can't. Because when you get up, normally you get up, you shower, you go. But sometimes your body is so exhausted. Like I've had to have my fiance, my parents, my sister actually wash my body because I didn't have the energy to
Mm,
get up and do something that, people take for granted. Being able to just get up and shower. Oftentimes it takes me about 30 to 45 minutes just for my body to adjust so I can get out of the bed to get going. And most people don't even think about things like that. For example, like for me, grocery shopping, meal prepping, things like that. I had to really, now I suck at meal prepping now, but in the beginning, I had to kind of utilize that a little bit because there was days where I just did not feel like cooking, and you can't live off Lunchables and oodles of noodles. It's not healthy to live off that stuff. And so I had to be like, okay, let me figure this out, to what I was going to eat, because I knew there was going to be days that I wasn't going to be able to. And then I even went through the where I had, I lost, you know, I family and I lost friends because
mm,
you didn't understand that, oh, well, Jay was fine yesterday and now she's in the bed now. What's wrong? Or is she faking?
mm,
Because that's one thing that a lot of lupus survivors that we face is because you cannot see what's going on from the outside, you automatically think that it's in our head. That is, it's just in our head and you don't believe us. Even like I said, I was a competitive cheerleader when I found out. I had my coach used to bring in people to help us with tumbling and cheers. And I had a trainer tell me that I was faking. They made me sit out of practice because he was thought I was faking because I couldn't straighten my arm. And
mm.
he even had the nerve to ask me, like, well, who diagnosed you with that you can't straighten your arm? And of
Wow.
course, young Jay was like, my mama. um, but, and I didn't know that I had lupus, but I was showing the symptoms. And then it was like a week later where I went to a sports med doctor, and then he referred me to his friend who was a rheumatologist. And so I literally got diagnosed the same day that I went to go see him because I had blood ulcers all throughout my mouth. And he
Mm,
said, bring her in. And then I found out that I didn't have any platelets. Um, so I
okay.
got immediately admitted. But similar to Charnay, like those are the things that you face. You face loss of friends, you face fatigue, you face people not understanding just some of the things that people take, like people take lawn care, people take that for granted, or being able to sit out in the sun all day. If we go to the beach, you're gonna see like a whole igloo of umbrellas because our skin can't take that much sun exposure, and if we get any, we're probably more than likely going to be in the bed for the rest of the day. And so it's not one of those things where you get diagnosed, you face these symptoms, you get medicine, and then that's it. It's no, it's a ever evolving, ever changing thing as you get older. And then your symptoms, things that you experience that your body didn't experience in your 20s, may be experienced in your 30s. And it's just an ever changing process.
Yeah. Yeah. Shawty, I see you shaking your head. You co-signing? You picking up what she's putting down?
Jade is speaking facts. Like, and another thing that I wanted to piggyback off of when she was saying about the sunlight, another thing that, it kind of irritates us a little bit is being in the grocery stores because of the
Mm,
fluorescent lights. Like we can't shop for a long time, so that's another thing that, we have to think about. Okay, well, let me run in this store real quick. Let me get what I need so I can go ahead and get on that before I get sick, so all of that. Jade was speaking facts.
So, Dr. Brooks, the word, another, I'm dropping another fancy word here, anti-inflammatory, right? And so those are the foods that typically help with people that are living with lupus. Uh, A, is that true? And then B, what are some of those things? My nutritionist is texting me, so I think she's going to try to join us here, but
Okay.
help us understand why that. Oh, she's popping in, but why is the anti-inflammatory diet such a good one for people living with lupus?
So I am a strong believer that food is medicine. So when we have conditions, and honestly, I could probably think of a lot of the chronic illnesses that we suffer from, diet should be like the first thing addressed, because not only does it help with managing the condition in the immediate term, it may take some while, but it's very helpful for that longevity of coming off of medications or even just improving in your symptoms. So because we know that lupus is an autoimmune condition, granted, we don't know exactly what causes it, but we do know that there are certain factors that can stimulate a flare. So if we can adjust the type of foods that we eat that trigger those flares, anti-inflammatory foods are going to be helpful for that. And honestly, those types of foods and antioxidants are good for a lot of chronic illnesses. And lupus is considered a chronic illness. So I am going to pass the mic on over to Dr. Yolanda.
So if you're just joining us, we're here talking about, it's Lupus Awareness Month. May is Lupus Awareness Month, and we're here talking to two lupus warriors. Well, everybody on here is a lupus warrior in some respect. We've got Charnay, we've got Jade, who is, her organization called Crowning Lupus, that she just started on her own. She was like, look, there's not enough people around in my area that can handle it, so I'm going to start my own. And then we have Dr. Brookings here. And just joining us is no stranger to BDO. She is a great friend of BDO. It is Dr. Yolanda, and she does a monthly show called Mind, Body, and Stress here on BDO. She is a double board certified. She is both a pediatrician as well as a bariatrician. So she's going to be talking, she's going to put on the bariatrician hat and just kind of talk about what that anti-inflammatory diet in terms of, and piggyback on what Dr. Brookins was saying, and let's take it to the next level. Dr. Yolanda, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, Dr. Brookins. You set it right on up. You're right. You teed it up, because it is about the types of foods that will decrease inflammation and, again, increase antioxidants. And interestingly, what people don't realize, so my mother actually suffered from lupus, and she died at an early age. She was 57 when she died. And just as right before passing, she actually had gotten a nutritionist that really got it. It was a little bit late for her, but she began juicing, really understanding how vegetables, fresh fruits and vegetables were essential to the diet. I'm always talking about you don't have to become, vegan. When we talk about increasing fruits and vegetables in our diet, it doesn't have to be total, but a good 80%, 90%. It would be great if you could get these fruits and vegetables. But the things that inflame you always is going to be sugar, processed foods, and sugar added. Any added sugar is inflammatory. So the first thing I always like to address, everyone wants to take vitamins, and I want everyone to take vitamins and supplements. But the last type of vitamins I want you to take are gummies. Because what happens is everybody wants to take a gummy vitamin because it tastes good. It's helpful for them to maybe remember, and it's pleasant. But the sugar is so inflammatory that it actually makes your digestive system adverse to actually absorbing the nutrients that you're trying to get in. So, we all know the vitamin business is a multi-million-dollar business, but half of it is because all vitamins are not, created equal. I will say that. But the things that, people want to take their calcium in chocolates. Come on, guys. Like, you can take your calcium in other ways. So we need to think about that. We're adding so much sugar to our diets, trying to get the good stuff, when you can get the good stuff in your fresh fruits and vegetables. Carrots and beets. Beets are anti-inflammatory. They also really are good for boosting your blood cells. You want to look at things like turmeric, that's anti-inflammatory. You want to look at things like cinnamon, garlic. There's so many anti-inflammatory foods that actually taste good. So they're good for, we don't know it, but rosemary, basil, sage, a lot of the herbs are actually anti-inflammatory. So we can use food as medicine, because it is the first medicine, to flavor our foods and also treat some of the chronic illnesses that we're facing. It's not just lupus that people with lupus that would benefit from these changes in their diets, but most of us could benefit from adding turmeric, from adding garlic, from adding herbs and spices, from decreasing sugar, water, 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 water. I have to say this, please. Hydration. We are not hydrated enough. And so we can also decrease inflammation just by, it's like a dilution process, right? You're decreasing the inflammation by diluting your system. And lastly, alkaline diets have a lot of green vegetables in them, right? So cruciferous things. You really want to look at I will leave you guys with this one tip that I love, and I did this during COVID, because a lot of other things can't live in alkaline environments either, like viruses and things can't live in alkaline environments. They live better in acidic environments. So there's something called dandelion tea. It is one of the most alkaline liquids, fluids that I know of. It has a pH of 22. It's really, really high. So now the problem is, once you add sugar, you're decreasing the pH because you're adding the acidic. So think about that. Don't add too much sugar. Don't add a bunch of honey. Don't sweeten it. But if you can start drinking some of your teas and some of the things that some of these herbs, anise, things like that, without a lot of sugar, add cinnamon. Cinnamon makes it taste sweet without adding sugar. Then you can actually alkalinize your diet. So there's a lot of ways to alkalinize your diet and get healthy and actually make your food taste good at the same time.
What she kept doing right there, that's what I'm talking about. that's why we have her on here, because you see she's got lived experience, personal experience with lupus, as well as she's got a knowledge base that can help our other lupus warriors eat healthier and live and reduce the flare-ups. But let's turn to another question that doesn't get asked with anybody that's living with chronic illness is, how do you pay for it? How do you adjust your finances in order to be able to live with a chronic illness? And that's why we have my man Gus. He's been paying attention. He's been so patient. We've been 37 minutes into the show. We just getting to you, brother. So
I got questions. Does dandelion tea have caffeine or no?
No caffeine.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you can. No caffeine. It's uncaffeinated. I guess, what is that? Decaffeinated. Decaffeinated.
See, I'm gonna have to watch your show. See,
yeah,
because we're on a radical diet change in our house. So, to the kind of diet you were talking about. See, here's the thing with kind of what I do. When I show up, it's usually after the fact, you know. So it's just kind of three things I was thinking about this when Ellis told me about it. So there's like early on, before you know something's happened. Okay, something's happened. What do I do now? And then in the aftermath. So if I can encourage anything with everyone that's listening, one of the things we have to do with our finances, it's not real sexy, but it's called manage risk. Manage risk. When you get a car, what do they make you buy? When you get a car and it's got a loan on it, you don't pay cash for it, what do they make you get? Insurance. If you buy a house and it's got a mortgage on it, what do they make you buy? Insurance. Well, why is it that 60 to 70% of us on our person, which is the most valuable thing we have, don't do that? And here's one of the things that insurance has today that didn't have in the past that could help you out if you get diagnosed with lupus or some other kind of chronic disease. As early as 2 weeks old, you can get insurance on a child, and you should. And as soon as possible, you want to get insurance that has what's called living benefits. What are living benefits? Living benefits are benefits that can be enacted for you, for your benefit, and you don't have to have a terminal illness and you don't have to die. You could get diagnosed with lupus and maybe you can't work. And there's some things that you need help with, maybe around the house. You need a caregiver. There are insurance products that have critical and chronic illness riders on them that can be the death benefit that you buy. You bought a $500,000 policy that can be accelerated, and you can use it to support you should something like lupus happen or any other thing, heart attack, cancer, stroke, a car accident, anything. So the first thing I would say to you is prevention. Okay, as much as possible. So now if somebody's in your house and they're older than 2 weeks, they should have one of these policies on them that has living benefits on it. Now you heard it, so you need to make that happen. Okay. Now let's say you get diagnosed, and I was on lupus.org and I was doing some research because my wife had renal failure and immediately Medicare kicked in. Okay, and I saw that lupus wasn't something that Medicare kicked in right away. It's a 2-year wait, but there were a lot of resources on lupus.org in terms of federal programs that were available. But here's something I want you to think about. A trust. Think about getting your assets put in a trust. Why? At some point in the future, you may want to take advantage of programs that the government requires certain income levels for you to have. Okay, now I know people that have 7, 8 figures, but their money's in trust and they qualify for some of those benefits on paper. It's what you have that's in your name that is a problem. It's not having it, it's having it owned in your name. And then they have a look back period that they want to look back and see whether or not you owned it. Because if you want to get on those programs, they want your personal assets to be at a certain level. That's where certain kinds of trust can be very helpful for you to put assets in so that you don't have to spend them down to get advantage of those programs. Okay. There aren't a lot of them, but I was able to find one, and I got to do some more research on it. There are things called annuities. Have you guys heard of annuities? But there are annuities that have long-term care riders on them that provide custodial care. And some of them you don't have to be underwritten. What does that mean? They don't call Dr. Sharika and Dr. Yolanda and get an attending physician statement and, and look at it and see what your health is, and you can still get the product. Mm-hmm. And then you put a lump sum of money in it, and then they will extend the amount of money that you put in it and can be used to take care of yourself. So those are some of the things that I would be making myself aware of, and get with a financial professional and have them look and see what assets you have. What can we do? How can we place them? How can we protect them so that so you don't have to spend all your money towards your health care. So those would be some initial things that I would take a look at.
That is fantastic. So and that's good. That's some great advice, even if you don't have lupus, right? So that's some things: preventative care, getting that trust, protecting your assets, thinking about the future. The earlier, the better. Both of y'all are still very young. The earlier you can start saving for you, the better. And the more. Go ahead, guys.
Here's the other thing. And Jade and Charnay, you can tell me, you have a strong support group around you of people that are of help. Okay. Now, what if something was to happen to them? How does that impact you? They need to take care of themselves with these same kind of tools so that if something should happen to them, they can get help. And if it's done correctly, that help can still be there to support you as well. Okay, so your caregivers, they need to be taken care of. We need to have them supported and covered. So God forbid something would happen to them, the care that we're providing for them can still provide an umbrella of protection for you. Okay, but I wanted to add that in there.
That's perfect. So we're going to shift in just a little bit of time we have left. There's one more thing that we haven't talked about, and that is, how are you in a relationship? How are your romantic relationships impacted by the lupus diagnosis? So Jade, I heard you mention earlier you have a fiance. When did you tell him? How did you tell him when y'all first started dating? How did that process go for you romantically?
Yeah, she's
Oh,
muted.
we can't hear you. We can't hear you. I know I want to hear this story, but I'm sorry, we can't hear you. No, no. Yeah, keep working on that sound because I would definitely want to hear that story. Yeah, yeah. You might try to go out and come back in. We'll switch to Charnay. Um, if you are dating, if you tried dating, if you were dating, how does that process go for you?
Dating with Lupus is tough. Because he want to take you out on a romantic date in the daytime. And so, you can't
Yeah,
be out there in the sun. So it's kind of like, a lot of the advances that he'll try to do, you're like, oh, try the spontaneity, try to be spontaneous. It's
right,
like, well, I can't be spontaneous with you because like I was telling you earlier, you have to figure out where you can spend your energy.
right,
It's like,
right,
okay, text me, a couple of days that we could get together and I pick one so I can know, when
right.
I'm able to go out and date you. And so it's a little complicated. I'm the type that, if I'm dating somebody, I say it right off the bat. I'm just like, hey, I have lupus. It's going to be some days where you're going to call me. You trying to chat, tell me about your day. And I
Mhm,
don't feel like talking. Like, I don't want to answer the phone. And so that
mhm.
can be a little difficult, trying to date somebody and have a chronic illness, but it is doable. It is doable, but you just have to be with someone that truly understands, like, hey, I like you, it's just today I don't like you too much because I'm tired. So
I love you, but I don't like you today.
And that's just not for chronic illnesses. How about that? So
Yeah, I've seen that
that's
movie in my
that's
38
simple
years.
advice.
I've seen that movie.
but it is doable. It's totally doable. So if somebody has a chronic illness, definitely put yourself out there and just don't limit yourself. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Jade, I hope we
All
can hear
right,
you
can
now.
you hear me now?
Yes,
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 we got you.
Oh,
yes.
hallelujah. So I actually met my fiance online, and the first two times he asked me out, I didn't even tell him that I had lupus. So the first two times he asked me out, I got sick. The first time in my mind, I had infusion the day before. And in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm going to be able to go on this date. And that was not how it played out. So instead of me
Mm,
telling him, I was just like, I'm sorry, something came up. Then the second time I
mm,
flared. So the third time it was funny because I was fine. And he was like, I just wanted you to know if you stood me up this time, I was not going to ask you another date. Um, but let's see, I think we went on another date the very next weekend and I wasn't feeling well. And so I had to tell him, but he was so open. And it was the first time because I literally had said, okay, God, you have given me a lot of frogs, or maybe I had just accepted a lot of frogs. I don't know what was going on in the atmosphere, but I had prayed over this one. And so I was like, all right, God, I'm this on you. We got to work this thing out. And so, through that prayer, I just said, you know what, I'm going to be open with him. And so I was like, hey, I have lupus and I have arthritis. And lately it's brought about some asthma issues. And he was like, okay, let me do some research. Is there a website? And I just started crying
mm,
because I was like, I had never had that to where I didn't even have to go into detail. He wanted to know for himself. Now,
mm.
I say he went overboard, but it was really, really sweet because literally next thing I know, he was bringing me fruits like, babe, I read this was like for inflammation and you're not supposed to be eating right there. So I threw that
Oh,
in the
I like
trash
him.
and
I
I was
like him.
like, that was my leftovers for lunch. Are you cooking? Like you threw what are you cooking?
I
Um,
like him.
but he was amazing. Like,
Mm.
and I'm not going to get emotional, but
Yeah.
He was just a true blessing. He literally took time on his own to learn. And I really thought, like, intimacy wise, it's not easy on him, because there are times where I'm physically unable to. And I thought, I told him, babe, I love you enough to, if this is too much, I love you enough to let you go. And he was like, I prayed about it, prayed over you, and you are who God sent to me. And so we're going to get through this together. And he was like, now I'm a man, so I ain't gonna say I ain't gonna be frustrated, but we gonna work through it. And literally that's what we've been doing. And so he might be watching now. Hey, babe, Daniel, how are you doing? I love you so much.
Tell him we all love him. We love
We
this
love
video.
Daniel too.
I
I'm
really
like,
do.
I'm torn. I'm gonna say it out loud. I'm torn. I'm like, Daniel, you making us look bad, player.
Keep it up,
No,
Daniel.
but it's about the support. And here's what I want to say. I love this story because all of the things that happens with chronic illnesses, the thing that often derails people, like, for instance, I tell you, I'm a bariatrician, so I do weight loss management. But what happens is when I'm trying to help a person, like, create this whole regimen and lifestyle, it's the people around them that tend to be their biggest obstacles, right? The folks who just don't want to stop buying the food. Gus said they're on a radical, lifestyle change. They throwing it all out. That's what has to happen. Everybody around you has to actually take this on with you. And it isn't a burden. It's actually a blessing, because guess what? They're going to eat a whole lot better too. They're going to actually they're going to rest more. They're going to recognize that stress is actually causing issues in their bodies. So let's all de-stress. I mean, it's just such a wonderful, so I love to hear it, because the thing I'm always having to talk to people about is you got to understand that sometimes when I say detox, I don't mean detox just the stuff in the food. I'm talking about some people. Some people got to be detox when you are going through like radical changes. So that's just my soapbox.
No, Dr. Yolanda, I have to cut in right there, because you are so right. And I send this, Charnay will tell you, I send them messages weekly about, a lot of times there's power in being silent and being still. Because I'm a firm believer, God will show you when it's time for you to let go. So oftentimes God puts people in your life for a reason, and then sometimes a season. And sometimes we try to make temporary people,
we try to make
lifetime people, and then you end up with all this other baggage. And for chronic illness warriors, you can't do that, because the reality is that baggage starts to internalize, and all of that stress causes and leads to flares. And so I'm at the most peace that I've had in years, because I literally said, this person is not worth. And so whether it's a family member, a sorority member, whoever it is, people on the job, you will deal with me on a hello, goodbye basis, because my health is more important. And Daniel, like, he knows the clues now. He knows when I get a, hey, how are you? He knows, okay, that's not somebody that she wanted energy. Let's keep it moving very quickly.
I love it.
And even, my friends around me, they know me well enough. Like, they know I'm an energy person, and I'm not, I fought too hard to get to this place in battling lupus. There is no way that I'm going to turn back. And obviously we have to remind each other, like Charnay reminds me, I remind her, like, we call each other a lupus village, because we really are. So like you said, you're not just detoxing food. Sometimes you got to detox people and everything else in between.
And the thing about Black women is many of us are empaths. We just don't recognize it and don't claim it. So energy is important. So we take on so many people's energies, whether we want to or not. We just do it. It's just natural. It's a nurturing thing. It's just, we're healers, we're nurturers, but we're empaths, and we take people's energy. And so we have to be careful about that. So you got to protect your energy. So I'm all about it. So.
Amen. Yeah.
I didn't take it to church or nothing, but I'm just saying, I just want everybody to be protective of themselves. So I love this conversation.
Amen. So as we're wrapping up here, I want to give everybody a chance to give their final thoughts. I did have to put on the screen, praise God for Daniel. Daniel, keep setting that bar. I'm joking, but I'm being serious now. Keep setting that bar higher for everybody, for every man to reach, because that's how every man should be when it comes to his mate and the person he's choosing to be with. So kudos to you, Daniel, if you're watching. If not, when you watch the playback, we just want to give you your flowers now for doing what you need to do in order to keep Jade happy and healthy. So I appreciate you bringing that fruit and taking that old leftovers out her refrigerator. Okay? Don't let her eat that old stuff. Come on now. Come on.
Daniel in the Bible had dietary convictions.
Look, I
Was
was
not
there.
eating
I was
bad
already there. The
food.
Daniel diet. I was there. I was
Come on
there.
now.
I was there with you.
You got the right one, Daniel. That's right.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You prayed for him. He sent you Daniel. He
Yeah.
sent you oh,
Oh, who's Daniel over there?
he sent you Daniel.
I
Okay.
love it.
Right. So as we're wrapping up here, Dr. Brookings, what are your final thoughts that kind of help our lupus warriors and their surrounding supporters? What are your final thoughts on this programming?
So I'm going to leave my final thoughts as a nephrologist, which is a kidney specialist. Most women, when they are diagnosed with lupus, about 50% of them are also diagnosed with it in their kidneys. And the thing about kidney disease and lupus is that if it is not treated appropriately, it can turn into end-stage kidney disease, therefore requiring dialysis, and ultimately you can have a transplant. So I am just encouraging people that if you're diagnosed with lupus, make sure you have your kidneys screened. So that's not only through your blood work, but also through your urine. And what you're wanting to check for is protein and blood. And this should be done, if you have lupus, this should be done at least maybe 4 times a year. And it's not just your nephrologist who can do this. Your primary care can check your urine as well. I was reading the chat. There was a question over here about, or a comment about asking for those labs when you go to your doctor's office. So if you know that you have lupus and you're not being checked often, speak up for yourself and ask, well, hey, when's the last time my lupus has been checked? But for it's called lupus nephritis, definitely make sure your kidneys are checked. And if you are at 20% kidney function, ask to be put on a transplant list, because it's very possible for you to receive a kidney before even requiring dialysis.
Yep.
I am a nephrologist in the state of Georgia. My practice is remote renal care. I'm 100% virtual. So I take care of anyone, anywhere in the state of Georgia. So I'll leave it on that note.
Please get your kidneys checked. My father has been on dialysis for the past 5 years. It's not fun. 3 times a week, 4 hours a day, plus it wipes him out for the rest of the day. You lose 3 days a week being on dialysis. So Black folks, know what stage you're in, right? And
That's it. Know your stage.
Know your stage. And then if you're in one of the earlier stages, it can be controlled and possibly reversed, but you've got to get control of it and don't let it sneak up on you, because once you get into 4 and 5, you start getting to end-stage renal failure, it becomes very, very problematic. So Black folks particularly, we tend to be sensitive. Our kidneys tend to be a little bit sensitive. There's some genetic testing that we've got going on there that I don't want to bore you with APO1 and all that kind of stuff.
Ellis, I'm going to take you around Georgia with me, because I did talk about Georgia. I'm going to take you with me.
Yes. So I could I tell folks, I would tell you, I will speak wherever you need me to speak. And I was very sensitive to that myself, and I make sure my kidneys are being checked. So understand it starts with just looking at in when you urinate, look in the toilet.
Look in the toilet. That's right.
Foamy urine is a clear sign that there's too much protein in your urine, and then go get that checked. So
That's
please start there. Great job. Dr. Yolanda.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay. This is excellent. So, and I want to actually piggyback off of that, because a lot of times the question is, if you know you have lupus, then you get these labs. The other thing is, if you know you have a family history of lupus, right? So my mother had lupus. So it was very important that I got screened for lupus, that my kids, I have 3 children, got screened. So you always want to be aware. So as Ellis is saying, he knows. And so he makes sure that he's aware and he gets screened. So that's the times that we got to have these conversations, that family members don't talk about everything. They don't talk about what they had or or what the uncle had that died early, or they just died of something with their kidneys. So we have to be a lot better at really naming things so that our families are aware of what our family history. I'm a pediatrician. Kids are born. I have a family in front of me, and sometimes I'll ask questions about family history, and you'd be surprised at how little people know about their families, or how vague they are about the thing that the person might have had, and it was just something they remember. And I'm like, were they on dialysis? Was it a machine? Did they have to go 3 times a week? Like, I have to feed them with some information, and oh, maybe that was it. And I'm thinking to myself, please, people, let's talk about what our families have so that we're more aware of what we should be aware of, so we know what testing to get. But I'm gonna end with the reason I do my show is mind, body, and stress. Is that stress is so important when it comes to autoimmune disorders and really any chronic disease. But with lupus, when you get stressed out, it just like diabetes, all of these things, it throws off your numbers, it inflames you, it actually flares you. So we have to be really mindful about what other activities. I want you eating right, I want you sleeping, but how are you de-stressing? You're taking, the steps to get the right people, in the right spaces. You can't remove everybody. So some people just have to be further out of your inner circle. But what are some mindfulness things you're doing? I do TM, but there's other things. I just want people to be aware that we have to recognize, as Gus was saying, there are all these things that you can have, these types of annuities, these funds. You can also look at ways to put self-care into these routines and pay for them through some of these manners. So I'm so big on self-care, so big on de-stressing, because we can try to eat all the right things to try to do all this stuff. But if you're still stressing out either over a job, over a relationship, or in the wrong community, then you're really setting yourself up, and it won't. It's like you're just still exacerbating the problem, and we got to deal with it from all angles. So stress is huge for me. I'm all about diet, but I'm also about stress.
Absolutely. And you can catch Dr. Yolanda every first Friday of each month, 1 p.m. Eastern, Mind, Body, and Stress, right here on blackdoctor.org. Mr. Tucker.
Yeah, I mean, oh man, it will just behoove you to put the financial fundamentals in place. You'll be well served no matter what. I encourage you to dial in on Financial Freedom Fridays. We're talking about the 7 spheres of wealth, and money is the least important. It is important, and you show me it's better to have it than not have it. Let me tell you. But your spiritual health, your soulical health, and your physical health, it doesn't make. Steve Jobs, at the end of his life, wanted more time, not more money. Okay. So you have to take care of yourself mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially. And so we talk a lot about all those things on Financial Freedom Fridays, and get with a financial professional and have a plan in place. Do you get in your car and just drive? Or do you put like some digits in there about where you're trying to go? So you need to have a financial GPS as well. Okay. So we can help you with that.
Absolutely. Charnay.
My final thought is just to, if you feel something is wrong with your body, go to the doctor, please. If I would have ignored the symptoms, I would have been, probably on dialysis. I was able to save my kidneys because I was proactive going to the doctor. I knew something was wrong. I felt something was wrong, felt something was wrong. And so I had to go to the doctor because I just, I want to live, and so just go to the doctor. And when you go to the doctor, advocate for yourself. A lot of the times, doctors try to, like you said, give us a Tylenol and be like, all right, bye. No, if you're not feeling right, you're going to sit here and talk to me. Like, we're going to have a conversation. And if that's not the doctor that's willing to have that conversation with you, go find another doctor. So those are my final thoughts.
Amen. And Jay, take us home.
So all of these points were so great. If I had to leave you guys with anything, you hear the saying, see something, say something. Well, when it comes to autoimmune, and when it just comes to the body, stop being so strong that you don't know when it's time to take off your superwoman or superman cape. When you see that either your family member or your spouse or you, something is going on, say something. Be vigilant and be determined about that. Go to the doctor, but not only go to the doctor, like Charnay said, have a conversation with that doctor. And if you're not pleased with what he's saying or she's saying, go to another one, but also do your own research. Now don't be the Google specialist. Don't do that. But listen to your body. Get a diary. Write down the symptoms that you feel every day. Because if you're battling a chronic illness or lupus, you're going to feel differently from day to day. So get a diary, document. So when you go to the doctor, most people, you go to the doctor when you're feeling well. But the days that you're not feeling well, that's what the doctor needs to know. And if you have that diary of documentation of each day on this day, my legs were throbbing so bad I couldn't get up out the bed. On this day, my skin was inflamed and I didn't know what was going on. So I put the cream on that you prescribed. Now your doctor has something to work with. Now he or she can look at some different testings that they can do your blood work by, because now you guys are forming a partnership and you're making it a team effort. And then last but not least, talk to your family. Your family only knows what you give them. If you are private and you're not telling them, then how can they help you? When you're diagnosed, it's not just you, it's you and those who are around you. So be open and transparent with them so that you guys can navigate together. And that would be my point.
Well, that's how we're going to close this. May is Lupus Awareness Month. We hope you've learned something here today. I know you've learned something here today. You can laugh even with you have a chronic illness. And that's why we kept this energy high and fun this evening, because we want you to understand, we want you to learn, and learning does not have to be heavy, even when we're talking about a chronic illness like lupus. So shout out to Daniel. One more shout out to Daniel for what you're doing, brother. Keep setting the bar high for brothers. Thank you all for joining us. Share this with your friends. Like this program. Click the little like button. It's okay. It's not that hard. Like this program, and we're going to re-air this again in the future. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll see y'all next time.